morning, everyone. We're here with Forge Survivorship Center for our next coffee conversation, and we are here with Sharon Cook. I'm so excited to be here with Sharon this morning. I've gotten to know Sharon some over the pandemic, where we've spent probably once a week, I want to say, in conversation about things that we care about and things that we're excited for. And it's been such a joy to me. And I'm going to stop talking and turn it over to Sharon and ask her to introduce herself, which I know is a crazy question to ask in such a short amount of time for someone who has lived so much life. But Sharon, would you do us the favor of just letting us know some more things about you?
Yes, well, I'm Sharon Cook. I'm 73 now. I live in Blount County on 12 acres with my husband, a dog, Oscar, a three-legged cat, Leo. Before that, I lived in Birmingham, where I had a clinical psychology practice. We moved here about 17 years ago to be near my brother and friends and to have space for a big garden. Our lives before my cancers was made up of family and friends, clinical practice, gardening, artwork, and traveling. I had offices in Birmingham and Blount County. In Blount County, mostly it was a free clinic for veterans and their families. My first breast cancer diagnosis came in 2009. I was 62. I found a lump just a month after a normal mammogram. And I emphasize this because I think it's so important to do both self-exams and mammograms. Mm-hmm. I didn't think, why me? Because so many friends in my age group, women, have to deal with this diagnosis, including my sister-in-law. I was in some denial because I didn't deal with the fact that my breast cancer had traveled into the lymph nodes under one arm, making the diagnosis stage 2-3. Treatment was a partial mastectomy, a radiation chemotherapy, and then the 5 years of tamoxifen after that. I made the decision to cut way back on my professional work, not just because of the cancer, but my brother was very sick with prostate cancer and my father had Alzheimer's. My husband had already retired and I wanted to be present for my family as well as be able to take good care of myself. As my internist had told me, with surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy, it was a year of my life, a year where my activities and time was pretty much dominated by the cancer treatments and visits to the doctor. But after that year, I pretty much got back into life as I had it before until 2014, that I found another cancer diagnosis. I was short of breath and very weak. I was critically anemic, and the diagnosis was Waldenstrom's macroglobulinemia, a mouthful. It's a very rare blood cancer that destroys red blood cells. More chemotherapy, and again, the feeling of loss of control within is huge. It is a betrayal of your body. We did travel to Boston and Dana-Farber Cancer Institute to get a second opinion from the guru of this rare disease. But I was treated at UAB. It was another year lost where the focus is on surviving this new cancer. I bounced back, and by mid-2015, I'm back being active, caring for my mother, doing artwork, and spending time with friends and traveling with my husband. I did not dwell on the cancers. Maybe this was denial or good coping. In the spring of 2018, we were in the Galapagos Islands. I hiked, snorkeled, felt strong, I felt great, but I came home with a dry cough that I couldn't get rid of. After many doctors and tests, I found out that the original breast cancer had metastasized to the lining of my lungs. A new oncologist, a surgery to get rid of the fluid out of my lung area, and more chemotherapy. And this time it is stage 4. And I was told to get my affairs in order and given every indication that I only had months left. Now this is the time when I'm really coming to terms with the loss of life itself and understanding that my life would be shortened by years. this loss brought about a profound readjustment of my sense of self, time, and place in the universe. It is a paradigm shift in the order of my world and where I am. Symptoms were severe diarrhea, weight loss, um, hair loss again, peripheral neuropathy, weakness, and mental sluggishness, and a deep fatigue that's really hard to describe. We went back for another review at Dana-Farber. We needed confidence that UAB was doing all that could be done and should be done. The doctor at Dana-Farber was not so pessimistic about my diagnosis. He urged that there were many approaches, and if one of those approaches stopped working, there would be other options, and there were many more being researched now and soon to be available. So I pulled through that year and then into 2019 and was able to keep some of my volunteer and art activities. We even did some more traveling, including a trip out west and a very memorable trip to New York City. We did not live into the prognosis of a few months, though inside I was always aware of this grim possibility. I was doing fairly well in spite of the problems of being in treatment for the metastatic breast cancer, which was chemotherapy about every 3 weeks. Then in the early spring of 2020, concurrent with COVID, I became weak and more fatigued and thought it was the breast cancer getting worse. March was a very difficult month because the oncologist did not want me to come into UAB for new scans, which I wanted. I wanted to know what was going on. Early on in the emergence of COVID, UAB seemed to be in crisis. When I called to ask about whether I should come in for treatment, I had all different kinds of responses from different nurses, some telling me to come, some telling me not to come. One even said, keep the H away. I did skip that treatment. But I knew I was physically failing fast. And in some desperation, I contacted the hematologist who had treated the Waldenstroms. I knew something was bad wrong. In January and February, I had taught the art classes, participated in volunteer work, etc. But by March, I had breath and energy for very little. I felt weak, my bones hurt. The doctor, this Dr. Costa, had me come in for blood work. And he called us that night at home, and he said it was a new cancer, multiple myeloma, and I was in renal failure. I had to go in quickly the next morning. I needed immediate intervention, which he initiated at UAB. And I have little memory of the next 2 days, but he pulled me out of the woods. Multiple myeloma is a cancer of plasma cells that destroys bone. The doctor was very encouraging and urged me to consider treatment. And I have to say at this point, I had some real questions whether I was going to do more treatment. The chemotherapies for the breast cancer and the new cancer were combined. So this had me coming in, every other week for a couple months. I'm still on that schedule. I also had one of the new immunoresponsive drugs in pill form for the multiple myeloma. I take that at night. Because of the complication of breast cancer, I was not eligible for stem cell transplant, which is the treatment of choice for multiple myeloma. So now, along with the oncologist for the breast cancer, the hematologist for the multiple myeloma, there are a slew of other doctors following me on a fairly regular basis: pulmonologist, cardiologist, neurologist, endocrinologist, as well as my internist. And all of these doctors are particular specialists in dealing with their area plus cancer. The first few months of treatment for the multiple myeloma were pretty brutal. More diarrhea, general weakness, loss of energy, weight loss. My voice, which you can hear, is pretty strange, and all the rest. more than anything is the significant loss of energy and vitality. I wasn't able to do many of the things I used to do. Work as a psychologist, volunteer work, a full day in the garden, being able to help others, and travel. Some days just being up and active for most of the day is too much. Some days to be off the sofa is too much. But I still have many days that are good, and I'm still having more of these glad to be alive days than bad ones. That's my introduction. I'm sorry it's so long.
No, do not apologize, Sharon. I know there's so much, and I mean, you only covered the past few years in that, and I know that you've had so much life before that. But I'm so grateful that you've kind of given us a context for our conversation today, and thank you for sharing all of that. Part of the reason, Sharon, we're so excited to speak with you today is on the topic of coping, which is something that in COVID we've all had to think about at the very least. But I feel like you've had a large experience with the concepts of coping, and I'm wondering if you can speak to what does coping mean to you, and how has it changed through your diagnosis experience, because you've gone through several different diagnoses. So yeah, if you can speak to that, please.
Okay. Do my best here. To me, it's all about attitude. That one has three choices when you're faced with a major life difficulty. I guess it could be COVID or the cancer. You can be despairing, you can be angry, or you can hold on to loving the life that you have left, the people you care about, and to remain engaged with life and continue to give and grow where you can. Coping for me is to manage all this trauma and loss and not lose the sense of wonder in life, to not let it destroy what is meaningful in life. I think it's very much a conscious choice. The denial that I had used early on is also a coping strategy. I'm not so sure that was bad in the situations I described, because I didn't avoid treatment. I just refused to let the cancer and what it could mean dominate my thoughts and how I was living. Yeah. When I felt strong, I carried on with my life, and I still do. How has it changed? Well, I guess it's time with COVID, or the addition of other cancers, or more limitations and losses in my life. I guess, and sometimes more time on the couch. I really have to work a little harder at maintaining this attitude. I really have to be at peace with where I am, even if that is just, this is a day to be on the sofa, and that's okay.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And thinking about that too, like sometimes things are okay. What are some coping tools that you use? Like, what are some coping tools you would identify in your life?
One of the ones that I utilized early on with when the breast cancer became metastatic, was making mandalas. I had bought a book on making mandalas actually decades ago when I was in clinical practice, but hadn't really used it. But I turned to it because I needed to do something for myself. There were all these treatments and things, medicines and vitamins and things being done to me and for me. I needed to do something healing for myself.
Yeah.
And so I turned to making mandalas. Mandala is an ancient Sanskrit word for circle. It's meant to relate that all of life is a mandala, a circle, from birth to death to spirit. And for centuries, it's an old art. Making mandalas has been an aid in healing and a tool to return to balance. And that's what it's been for me.
That is awesome. And I know we're going to show some mandalas here in a few minutes too.
There, of course, were many other things that helped me cope. My husband, number one, does so much for me. Time with friends. being out in nature. If I'm having a bad moment, I know that if I just carry myself outside
Mm-hmm.
and walk around, that always makes me feel better. Um, and then, of course, being with pets and writing. Writing has been particularly important, I think, since I got the multiple myeloma diagnosis for some reason. And that's how I turned to doing the blog.
Yeah.
Um,
And will you share the blog name for those of us who may not know it?
okay, it's SharonStory.blog.
Mm-hmm.
No apostrophe, just the words run together, SharonStory.blog. And I want to say something else about the mandalas because this was important. After I had made quite a few, friends looked at them and encouraged me. Actually, they contacted somebody at the library here in Blount County, and the libraries wanted to display them, which they did. And then people wanted to learn how to do them. So I started doing classes at the libraries here in Blount County on making mandalas, and that was extremely rewarding. Of course, that was all before COVID, and when COVID came about, that came to an end. But that was great for me. I really enjoyed doing that.
Those are such special pieces because they're all unique. So I'm excited to share some of those at a later time in this conversation. And kind of talking about the mandalas and the chances you've gotten to do teaching and interact with people. I'm wondering if you can share a specific story that has to do with coping, that a story that's meaningful to you that kind of comes to mind when we're talking about coping.
Yes, and it's been an extremely meaningful story, and it's an internal one. It was a spiritual gift because at some point, kind of after the metastatic breast cancer diagnosis, when I was pretty sick, I heard myself bemoan, "I'm just not me anymore." And it seemed a pretty reasonable thing to say because I'm definitely different. Low energy, not as strong, the frequent threats of diarrhea, my schedule dominated by doctor and treatments, etc. But then I sort of stepped outside of myself, and I was listening as if to another person, and I felt myself respond with a very deep knowing, I remain me. The essence of who I am as a human being is unchanged. And this was not trivial to me at all. And it's a strong awareness that has stayed with me and reassured me throughout the journey. There are moments that the hard things predominate, but so far I always come back to remembering who I am, what is meaningful to me, how I want to be in relationship to the people in my life, the gift in knowing myself deeply, and I just won't let cancer take that away.
Yeah. Absolutely, Sharon. Thank you for sharing that story. I'm wondering, and kind of you spoke about continuing to be yourself, and how has some of these coping mechanisms impacted your relationships with your husband, with your animals, with your friends?
I just feel deeply loved and appreciated. I mean, for my husband, I just can't say how much he's done. It's just amazing the things he's had to do for me, and whether it's for me personally or in the house or whatever. And it's a beautiful feeling. And I've gotten very similar from friends who, express their caring and come. I know anytime I wouldn't want to be alone, that it would just take a phone call. At this point, it would probably be a Zoom experience or maybe outside. Sometimes we have people come over and we're all outside, and that's fine. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but
Oh, yeah.
it's just more deeply. I just feel a lot of gratitude.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I know that I've always felt grateful to talk to you. So I know a lot of your in your relationships, the feelings are mutual. I want to ask just another couple of questions that you've kind of covered a little bit, but just want to see if you want to expound on any of them. One of those questions is, how have some of your coping tools brought you through the day-to-day experiences of living with a diagnosis? And knowing that sometimes taking a walk outside is helpful, like you mentioned, and some days are just couch days. But is there a specific tool or routine or pattern that you found that is really helpful for your day-to-day experience?
I watch my attitude. I've said this
Mm-hmm.
many times in my blog. If I notice myself getting low,
Mm-hmm.
I know the things that will bring me up, and I also know that there are days I can just allow myself to be on the sofa and just be. I guess what I've had to adjust to is appreciating the value of being versus doing. In my life before, there was a lot of doing, which I enjoyed mostly, like everybody. But if something isn't working, you go do something else. So sometimes that's not available to me now. So it's being, is really appreciating just being. So why else go through sometimes all the treatments and difficulties the cancers have brought if I didn't appreciate just being in life, appreciating each moment. That spring, when that doctor said that she didn't think I would live but a few months, and here I was able to experience the next spring. That was 2019, and it's just like everything just twinkled and sparkled, and the sky was bluer, and the breeze felt better, and the colors were more vibrant. And so it's just the energy goes into being and appreciating. Am I answering your question?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's something so helpful to hear right now, and how much just stagnant we are in the world. That appreciation of being is very wise. Well, Sharon, I want to know, is there anything else you'd like to share with us on the recording before we move into a conversation section?
I don't think so.
I know I have enjoyed being with you in this conversation and for the past several months in our conversations. And I'm excited to continue to be with you through this weird world we're in, because you've brought me a lot of joy.